Welcome to Mind Life Weekly. My name is Derek and this channel is all about simple psychology for everyday life. If this is your first time here, thank you for clicking this video. If you're returning, I'm glad you're back. Either way, consider subscribing to our channel to stay updated on all of our videos. If you find this video useful, hit the bell icon to be notified of more future videos like these. Today we will be discussing the second part in this 3-part series about breaking bad habits. Like before, this is a more comprehensive video series, and so there will be timestamps in the video description if you want to skip ahead. However, it is recommended you do watch the video from start to end. So, without any further ado, let's begin. The principles of habits. To add on to our last discussion, there are more principles on habits, how they are formed and maintained. One important principle: actions do not come out of nowhere. We are not people who do things with no rhyme or reason. Everything we do is motivated by something. As a rule, what you think about and how you feel determines how you act. Consequently, thoughts and feelings determine our actions. Over time, these actions become habits. Therefore, if you learn how to change the way you think and feel about something, you can change the way you behave. You would eventually end up breaking the old habits and bringing in new ones. This particular concept is especially important for actions brought on by negative emotions like stress, fear, or anger. State-dependent learning states that every time a person feels an emotion, it will drive a certain type of behaviour and a way of being and doing things. Imagine a mansion with lots of different rooms. A happy room, a sad room, a fear room, an anger room, and so on. In the happy room, you will be reminded of happy moments in your life, of photographs from your birthday, videos of a family vacation, or a baseball from a special game. Something similar happens in the fear room. Every time you're in the fear room, you will see photographs of when you were afraid. You will see all the items that have scared you, and you will react the same way you did the first time you saw them. Emotions need a form of expression. The energy builds up inside of us and we become like pressure cookers. More and more pressure builds up and eventually it has to come out somewhere. In order to blow off some steam, people unconsciously develop certain habits. How does this process work in a person's mind? The mind will find something like nail biting, smoking, or overeating to help the person cope with those pent-up emotions. It will reduce the pressure and let off some steam, which is necessary to prevent them from self-destructing. However, relieving the pressure is only a temporary solution. If the pot stays on top of the stove and the flames keep heating it up, it'll just start building up pressure again. If the bad habit is driven by some kind of negative emotion, the ultimate solution is to change the way you feel and develop greater emotional balance. These changes will result in freedom. The mind will be free because the bad habit never gets triggered. The person will be in control and will have a choice on how to behave rather than letting it control their behaviour. If you want to know how to develop a greater emotional balance, then I suggest you watch our Emotional Mastery playlist. It will not just teach you how to relieve the tension as emotions build up, but more importantly, it'll teach you how to make sure that the pot gets taken off the stove. The videos focus on how to develop the emotional balance that keeps a person free, strong, and always on the move towards one's goals and ambitions. Let us look back at the pathways inside the mind, which was mentioned in our previous habit-breaking video. Every time somebody walks along a pathway, it becomes wider. In the same way, everything that you do, feel, and think regularly will have wider pathways inside your mind. Additionally, stronger emotion will reinforce the habit. This is equivalent to a bigger and heavier animal or a person walking down the path. They reinforce the path and make it wider and more visible to passers-by. This is the reason why people sometimes get trapped in negative behaviours. The feelings of anger, guilt, fear and frustration reinforce bad habits and feed into bad behaviour, hence making it stronger. Ironically, beating oneself up about failing in terms of changing a habit is just reinforcing it. If you fall back again to the old habit, remember Nerd Fitness Steve Kamm's words. When you screw up, skip a workout, eat bad foods or sleep in, it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. Welcome to the club. Rather than beating yourself up over a mistake, plan for it. Humans fall short all the time. People get off track. However, what separates the top performers from everyone else is that they get back on track very quickly. No matter what happens, just remain as a top performer. However, there is one exception to this rule. The feeling of frustration can break a habit. For now, let us discuss some important principles about habits and how to break or maintain them. The importance of replacing bad habits. Principle 1. Control your emotions to control your habits. Principle 2. Rather than eliminating a bad habit, replace it with a new one. This is very simple, and yet many people fall short of this one. Essentially, it sums up to nature abhors a vacuum. Unfortunately, this is also true for the mind. You cannot just remove a habit because then nothing exists. There is a vacuum, an emptiness. Your mind needs to fill that emptiness in order to ensure the old habit does not come back. Take the analogy of having a house full of squatters. The police come in and kick them out. However, as long as the house remains empty, there is a danger that those squatters or other squatters will come back and reside in it. If you redo the house and rent it out to a family to move in, who take care of the house and regularly pay rent, then the squatters can no longer occupy the house. This is how habits work too. One has to replace bad habits with good habits. There should be a change within so that one's emotions would no longer support bad habits. This is a great formula for success when it comes to making personal changes. Let us apply the principle in real life. A smoker might replace the habit of smoking by taking 3 deep breaths instead. Someone who overeats can modify one's food choices and intake to make it healthier. Let us say they choose to replace eating with drinking water. It is difficult to drink too much water, but drinking the right amount is beneficial. It detoxifies the body and helps with the whole thinning process too. When you replace food with water, there would no longer be a vacuum and there is nothing for the food to fill. At the same time, you will be doing something healthier for yourself. The moral of the story is that if you want to change a habit, find something which can divert your focus and eventually replace the habit. Ideally, it should be something beneficial and healthier than your current habit. Also bear in mind that emotions drive behaviours, hence be careful with the emotions you entertain. If mental energy is redirected towards the new habit, then the old habit shrivels up and dies, while the new habit thrives. Think of 2 plants and 1 stream of water. If you reroute that stream of water to feed the second plant, the old one will die while the other one thrives and blooms. Similarly, when you're changing habits, you have to avert your focus to positive behaviours and thoughts to form good habits. At this point, you may be asking yourself, how do I do that? Achieving emotional balance, emotional control, is going to be an important aspect to this. The information in the playlist Emotional Mastery will help you immensely in dealing with your emotions. Secondly, remember the general formula. Your thoughts determine how you feel. Your feelings determine how you act, and your actions are what end up becoming habits. In short, if you want to create new habits to replace old ones, you need new actions too. To have new actions, you need new feelings. To have new feelings, you need new thoughts. Keep in mind that the human brain cannot think of 2 things at the same time. It is unnatural for humans because it splits the stream of mental energy on one's focus. Therefore, everything a person does becomes weaker and weaker until there is no real effect anymore. Hence, turning your thoughts away from habit-forming thoughts to new and healthier ones is one step to break the cycle. Let us imagine that you're on your way from a heavy day at work. You're thinking of rewarding yourself with a slice of chocolate cake. All the way home, you're thinking about chocolate cake and how delicious and wonderful it is, and all sorts of things. Perhaps previously you have decided to go on a diet, which means you have to deprive yourself of that chocolate cake. You remind yourself, I am on a diet, I can't have that chocolate cake. Now, try this instead. Whatever you do, do not think of a black cat. Do not think of a little black cat climbing a green tree. Do not think of the little black dog jumping up the green tree trying to get the little black cat. Do not think of the little black cat winking at the little black dog, teasing, "Ah, you can't get me." What happens? Just as nature abhors a vacuum, the mind fundamentally does not handle negations. When you think about not having chocolate cake, you go through 2 stages. First, you've got to have a chocolate cake to think about, then you have to somehow get rid of it. But you have already spent mental energy thinking about the cake, so you are simply reinforcing that aspect by attempting to get rid of it. Therefore, the best way to avert your attention from the cake is to think about something else entirely, so there will be no energy left for the cake. How do we do this? Redirecting mental energy to change habits. Neuroscientists and psychologists have discovered that there are 2 ways in which even the most deeply rooted pathways inside the brain change. The first one is called top-down thinking. This approach considers thinking as willpower. It is about thinking about things on purpose and doing it over and over again. Top-down thinking can tremendously change people over time, but it requires more time and effort. The reason for this is because the neocortex, or the thinking part of the brain, has to affect the cortex below it, the mammalian brain and the reptilian brain, which are responsible for instinctive actions and strong emotions. The other method is quicker and more subtle. It's known as bottom-up thinking and refers to the use of the lower brain centers, the emotional and action brain. Change happens and starts unfolding over time. This manifests as a person develops completely new feelings, new actions and new thoughts. The key to make top-down changes is repetition. As a rule, repeating something over about 30 days will turn any act into a habit. If a person does it over and over and over again, it will become habitual. The connections created between the brain cells will become strong enough and a clear pathway will be formed, making it relatively easy to perform an action. It will become easier to do the habit than not to. The keys for bottom-up changes are emotion and variety. When a change occurs, it keeps the brain, specifically the lower brain centers, stimulated. Emotion, on the other hand, acts as the rocket fuel to the whole system. It makes everything on the inside develop faster. An example of how one can influence emotions for a bottom-up change is drinking water. The habit of regularly drinking 8 or more glasses of water starts subtly at first, but has tremendous impact on the person's well-being over time. However, it requires little or no thinking at all. It is automatic in a person. Drinking water is a healthy habit. However, you'll see most children and even some adults prefer sodas and sweet sugary drinks instead. I used to be one of them during my late teenage years. However, 2 things happened to me that totally changed all that without even realizing it myself. The first thing happened when I was reading a book. In one particular book I was reading, the hero got lost in the desert and struggled to survive. The book described his thirst and how water suddenly became the most precious commodity for him, more precious than gold and all the riches in the world. While I was reading, I remember experiencing a thirst myself and the strong urge to drink. Consequently, I put down the book, went downstairs and got myself a fresh, cool glass of water. A few days later, I watched a movie which tackled the same theme, water. The movie was about soldiers during the Second World War who were lost in the desert, trying to make their way back to an oasis. The soldier who survived walked into a bar in some exotic location and ordered a cold glass of beer. However, the funny thing is, even if I am aware that beer is different from water, I kept thinking of the latter while I watched the soldier finish his drink. From that day until now, my habit continuously changed, although I did not realize it immediately. I still drink juices and soda, but the habit started to decrease. It became less and less satisfying. Over time, I started to choose bottled water more. It even came to the point when months would go by and I would realize that I have only consumed water. This is a great example of a bottom-up change. It is something, a metaphor or a symbol that has an emotional charge. The key for bottom-up changes is that it arouses the imagination so that an emotional charge rushes through the person, inciting excitement for the change that is about to happen. How could this apply to the other senses? Let me give you another example. Some time ago, as a result of his travels, a friend was inflicted with some kind of parasite in his intestines. It loved sugar and would make him feel worse each time he ate foods that contained sugar. There wasn't any medication for his condition, so his only choice was to starve the parasite. This meant cutting out all of the delicious sugary food from his diet. At first it was very hard to do because all the food he normally ate had some form of sugar. Whenever he was offered a sugary snack or craved something sweet, he learned to fight it off by taking 3 deep breaths. Each time he was faced with a challenge, his instinct was to give in to his cravings. But then instantly a thought would arise. That would feed the enemy. I can't do that. I'm going to beat them. Fortunately, his natural competitiveness totally transformed the way he viewed the situation. During one of his own meditative experiences, he developed this rather interesting storyline. The bugs inside his intestine were the enemy army, and he was the cunning general. He had to defeat his enemies even with the few remaining good men on his side. He had to lay seeds to fortify his castle and stop the enemy from coming in. By cutting out the supply lines, he starved them out without ever having to fight a battle. You too can create your own story and win your own battles. To recap, there are 2 strategies for making changes: top-down and bottom-up. Top-down is thinking about things over and over again. Bottom-up is developing a new story and a new metaphor so one can see the whole situation differently. As a result, the person would feel and think differently too. A new way of thinking and feeling would eventually lead to a new behaviour. These methods are complementary and you can use them together to break your very own bad habits. Conclusion. Okay, we now have all key principles in place. In the third and final part of this video series, I will present 7 simple steps to break bad habits for good. Mind Life Weekly will present a unique formula for each step, so do hit the bell icon to be notified when the video is released. That's about it from me. I hope you learned something valuable from our video. Mind Life Weekly will continue to have more discussions on the human mind, as well as 7 easy steps to break any bad habits for good. So stay excited for our next fascinating video. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, show us your appreciation by tapping the like button on your way out. And remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay informed when our next video is published, which will be much sooner than you think.